Good evening, and welcome to this evening's talk. We appreciate you all coming tonight. Very excited to welcome our guest to UT Austin. My name is Ryan Streeter. I'm the director of the Center for Politics and Governance here at UT, and it's my privilege to welcome all of you here tonight. I'd like to thank our co-sponsors, the Clements Center and the Strauss Center as well, for co-sponsoring this, as well as AEI on campus. We appreciate all of you coming tonight, and we appreciate the partnership that pulled the event together. It's my privilege to introduce to you Arthur Brooks. He's the president of the American Enterprise Institute in Washington, D.C., one of our nation's more influential and larger think tanks. I get asked by students from time to time what think tanks actually do. What are think tanks? Think tanks are places that research and advocate for public policy change. They complement academic research by producing and suggesting solutions to public policy problems, both domestic and foreign. Before Dr. Brooks was the president of AEI, he came from the academy. He was an economist and a professor of social entrepreneurship at Syracuse University. He's the author of 11 books and hundreds of articles. His latest book, The Conservative Heart, is on the New York Times bestseller list, as was his previous book, The Road to Freedom. His books before that, Who Really Cares and Gross National Happiness, garnered national attention by changing the way we think about how happiness, compassion, and other types of behaviors are interrelated to one another. You can see him contributing to the New York Times regularly, and you'll find him on national television shows a lot as well. Before he was an academic and a public policy professional, Dr. Brooks was a classical musician, both here and in Spain, French hornist. And just proof, once again, that the answer to the question, what do I need to be doing to actually get a job in a think tank, has many answers. You may want to dust off that trombone or pull out that oboe that your parents begged you to stop playing years ago. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Brooks to you tonight, and also he will be signing some books as you leave at the table on the way out. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Arthur Brooks.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you to all of you. What an honor to be with you here at UT. It's a great institution. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. I have some old friends and some new friends here, and I've been looking forward to talking to you about this new book that I have, but more importantly, I want to talk to you today about the why of your work and the why of my work. Ryan gave you a little bit of a background in my strange path to where I am today. He didn't fill in all of the sketchy details, so maybe I will. When I was 19, I dropped out of college. Dropped out, kicked out, splitting hairs. And I went on the road as a musician because that was my dream. If you'd asked me when I was a little kid, when I was 6 years old, I wouldn't have said, Mommy, when I grow up, I want to be, the president of a right-wing think tank. That wouldn't have been my first choice of careers. I wanted to be a French horn player. I wanted to be a musician. My whole life, that's what I wanted. And the why of my life was going to be to play the greatest music in the world and play it for the greatest conductors in front of the audiences in the world's greatest concert halls. This is what I wanted since I was a little kid. I know it's weird, but it's true. And when I was in college and I realized in my freshman year that I shouldn't be there, that other people were more serious than me and it really wasn't going so well, I dropped out and I went on the road. And it was great, I have to say. I played chamber music all over the United States. I spent 2 years touring with a jazz guitar player named Charlie Bird and making albums. And I wound up in the end in the Barcelona Symphony. That's where I got married. And I played for a bunch of seasons in Barcelona. And when I was there, I had kind of a soul-searching time. I realized that I didn't actually know truly the why of my career. I couldn't really answer that question very well. And the truth is, most people can't. I live in Washington, D.C. now, so you don't have to. Think of it that way. And in Washington, D.C., everybody asks all the time, because it's the most ambitious place in the world, what do you do? What do you do for a living? Nobody ever asks, why do you do what you do? Nobody ever, as a matter of fact, outside of Washington, D.C. either. I bet nobody's ever asked you that. I bet you rarely ask yourself that. Why do you do what you do? Why do you do now what you want to do, studying what you want to study, so that you can have the career that seems most logical and most compelling to you now? Well, when I was in Barcelona, I went in search of an answer to that question. Why do I do what I do? And I remember there was a quote from a composer, not a piece of music, but actual words from a composer that had a huge effect on me. My favorite composer at the time, and still my favorite composer today, and a composer that many of you know, even if you don't really listen to very much classical music, most of you have heard of Johann Sebastian Bach, arguably the greatest composer who ever lived. He lived from 1685 to 1750. 65 years, and he was truly a great and productive man. He published more than 1,000 pieces of music in his career. Chamber music, orchestral works, choral works, just every genre or every grouping of musical instruments. Incredible, totally productive. By the way, he also had 20 kids, which is productive. And Bach, near the end of his life, he wasn't famous like he's famous today. He was known as a great teacher. And he was asked by a minor biographer, words that were preserved through posterity, through some weird miracle today. He was asked by the biographer, why do you write music? See, this is the question, right? This is the question for each of us. Why do you do what you do? Herr Bach, why do you write music? And here was his answer, preserved for all time. The aim and final end of all music is nothing less than the glorification of God and the enjoyment of man. To glorify God and to serve my fellow men and women. That's what he said. And okay, so I asked myself, if somebody said to me, Brooks, why are you a French horn player in the Barcelona Symphony? Would my answer be, to glorify God and to serve my fellow man? Probably not. Probably not. And I decided I wanted to do something where I could answer that way and really mean it. So I changed jobs. I went back to college. I got my college degree when I was just before my 30th birthday. And I became an academic. And then later, the road led to where I am today at the American Enterprise Institute. And today, my job, unlike playing in the symphony, is a little different. See, I have 225 scholars and staff working together. And the main thing that we talk about is the free enterprise system, the American free enterprise system. And we talk about how it can serve more people and how we can make it stronger and better. Right? And then I ask myself sometimes the same question. See, being the president of this free enterprise think tank, why do I do what I do? Can I answer like Bach? For the good of my fellow men and women. Is that why I promote the free enterprise system? And the answer is yes. And I'm going to tell you why right now. I'm going to tell you why. No matter what your politics, whether you're a Democrat or Republican, whether you're a progressive or a conservative, why I believe you should join me as a warrior for the free enterprise system. And here's basically what it is. When I was little, growing up in Seattle, I grew up in a sort of working class, lower middle class environment. And there were people who were poor around, people on food stamps. Most people were from single parent families when I was growing up. But that wasn't poverty. I remember the first time I saw true poverty when I was a little kid. It was in the early 1970s. See, my older brother, who still lives in Seattle, he had a subscription to the National Geographic magazine. And I remember in the early 1970s seeing a picture that shocked me morally. It was a picture of a kid in sub-Saharan Africa with flies on his face and a distended belly. Those of you who are my age, you remember that picture. You remember the first time you saw an image of somebody who was actually starving to death. And you remember maybe what you felt when you saw that picture, which was the inability of doing anything. It was desperation and helplessness. And it was moral outrage, too. You thought to yourself, that isn't right that I'm eating and he isn't. It's not right. It's not humane. It's got to be stopped. But there was nothing you could do. I couldn't do anything. A few dimes in the basket on Sunday morning, almost to the poor, to be sure. But I knew that that wasn't actually going to solve the problem. Well, I grew up and went to college and dropped out and pursued my career and met my wife and got married. And my life proceeded apace. And occasionally I would look back and I would ask, what happened to that kid? And I didn't know. But then I found out. See, when I went back to college, I studied economics, which I knew nothing about. There's nobody in my family who's interested in business. Nobody studied economics at all. But I studied economics because I had to. And when I studied economics, I found the answer. Not to what happened to that kid, but what happened to the poorest people in the world. And I want to share it with you because for the first time today, maybe, I'm going to give you good news. See, from 1970, this is what I learned. Changed my life. From 1970 until today, the percentage of the world's population living in starvation, what's happened to it? 70% of Americans will say it's gotten worse. 70% of Americans believe that the world has gotten poorer in our lifetimes. They're wrong. From 1970 until today, the percentage of the world's population living on $1 a day or less, adjusted for inflation, of course, that percentage living at starvation's door has dropped since I was a child by 80%. There's been an 80% decline in the world's worst poverty since I was a kid. You know, I found this out. I wanted to shout it from the rooftops because you know that represents 2 billion people who were not starving, who would have been starving if things hadn't changed. I went in search of an answer. Why? What did this? You walk around Washington, D.C., where I live now, and people will say it's the incredible success of the United Nations, the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, U.S. foreign aid, central planning. Those explanations are wrong. Those are great institutions or not, you decide. But that's not what did it. What economists understand, no matter if they're on the right or the left, if they're mainstream economists, doesn't matter if they're Democrats or Republicans, is that 5 things pulled 2 billion of our brothers and sisters around the world out of poverty since I was a child. And here's what they are. Globalization, free trade, property rights, the rule of law, entrepreneurship. See, when I was a little kid, there was an explosion in the means of mass communication. I saw that boy. He saw me. He saw you. People all around the world, they saw how you live in this country if you were alive at that time, and they said, I don't want to be poor, and they're not. And they copied your way of life, is what it comes down to. See, it was the American free enterprise system, which is not perfect, by the way, and which must actually have a good system of regulation and government around it if it's going to be just and work right, to be sure. We'll talk more about that later. But it was the American free enterprise system spreading around the world after 1970 that pulled 2 billion of our brothers and sisters out of poverty for the very first time. That was the secret, and that's what I want more of. Here's the truth that I believe and that I offer to you. The reason for capitalism is not for us to get rich. The reason for capitalism is so that other people cannot be poor. That's the reason that we have the system and that we get to share it, is because we have in our hands the secret to pulling people out of poverty at the periphery of society. That's why I invite you to join me in this fight. No matter what your politics are, I don't care. I don't even care what my politics are. Human lives are at stake. And we can fix a big problem. We can get the next 2 billion people, but only if we work together and if we move beyond politics and we recognize that this truly is the solution. Okay. Now, I'm an advocate for this, as you can tell. I'm passionate about it, as you can tell. I talk about it a lot. And for years, for a long time, since I've been president of AEI, for 7 years, I've been talking about this. But I started noticing something a few years ago. See, I speak on college campuses all the time. AEI, my organization, has a network of college campuses all over the place. All the greatest universities, including the University of Texas, is in our network of campuses. And I speak on these campuses a lot. And I started noticing something. I would talk to students who are great. I mean, they're naturally activists and they want to help people, and I love that. That's why I love teaching at Syracuse. But I noticed that after I talked about this idea of lifting people up through free enterprise, students would come up afterward and they would say, oh, I'm down with this. I got it. I want to fight for this. But there's a problem. What's the problem? Is it really good for me? See, when you study business and you study economics and you study the free enterprise and capitalism, there's a tendency to push everybody toward work and acquisition and consumption and toward money. You know that feeling? Like everybody's trying to put you on a hamster wheel, those of you who are still in school? Get a job, get a good job, think about the future, make some money, huh? You know that feeling of maybe I don't want to do that, maybe it's not good for my soul? And I started asking myself, how do I square these things? Abundance through free enterprise is unambiguously the greatest achievement in human history for leading people out of poverty. No doubt about that. But at the same time, the way that we understand it in the West, the way that we understand it in the United States, it may or may not be good for you to lead the best life. How do we square these ideas? How do we put them together? 2 years ago, this was really on my heart. This was weighing heavy on me. I didn't know the answer. I didn't know how to talk about it. I was feeling bad about it, as a matter of fact. And at the time, I was traveling a lot to India. I go to India a lot. I just got back last week from India, as a matter of fact, where I have this collaboration with His Holiness the Dalai Lama, where AEI and the Dalai Lama, we do work together every year. He's become a mentor, even a friend, and he's helped me a lot in my own religious faith. But when I was first starting to go to India, it was interesting because it was about 2 years ago, and I had this question. How do I understand abundance for others without having it hurt you? And how do we have a system that's not based on materialism, despite the fact that we're celebrants of the free enterprise system? And I was on my way to Delhi, and I was with a scholar, a friend who works at AEI. He's one of my scholars. He's the India correspondent for the Wall Street Journal, as a matter of fact. His name is Sadanand Dume. He's terrific. Maybe some of you read his stuff. And he said, "What are you thinking about?" And I said, "Here's the deal." And I told him this problem. I filled him in on what I was insecure about. And he said, "Oh, I got a guy in India you need to talk to about this." And I said, "You got a guy in India that you want me to talk to about capitalism?" And he said, yeah, trust me. His name is Swami Gyanmuni. Now, I said, "You're putting me on. You want me to go to India and talk to a Swami about capitalism?" He said, "Trust me. If Swamis were rated by Yelp, he'd have 5 stars." Okay, which is actually, funny if you're under 40. So I got off the plane in Delhi, and we made an appointment, and I went to see Swami Gyanmuni. Turns out he's the administrator. He's a monk. He's an administrator at this temple in Delhi called the Swami Narayanakshardham Temple. Those of you who've been there, you may have seen this. It's actually a world-famous place, and it's magnificent. It's a wonder of the modern world. It was cut by stone-cutting artisans by hand, 10,000 of these artisans working full-time for 7 years. It's incredible. You can't believe it. You can't take your eyes off it. It's marvelous. And I was looking at it, but my thoughts were elsewhere, because I was thinking, I was about to meet the Swami, and I was thinking, I wonder if he'll understand me. I mean, he understands English for sure, but this is pretty nuanced stuff. Abundance, but my soul, etc. So I was thinking, how am I going to get this point across? And I see him coming toward me. It's a hot May day, and he's coming across this courtyard, and he's got a shaved head and an orange flowing robe, and he's looking all meditative and mellow. And I'm thinking, I wonder if he's going to understand my problem. And he gets about as far away as you are to me here, 3 yards away, and he looks at me and he says, "How you doing?" And I said, "Where are you from?" And he said, "Texas." So this is surreal, right? I've come to India to talk to a Swami about capitalism. It turns out he's from Texas. And I asked him his story, and he told me. It turns out his parents were petroleum engineers, and they were immigrants, and they came to Houston, where he was born. Now, let me back up for a second, okay? I want to back up for a second. I want you to hold the thought about the Swami in Houston, who was born in Houston. Hold that thought for a second, because I want to tell you about a study that actually was the reason I was so insecure about this thing in the first place, okay? See, this is a study from 2 researchers at the University of Rochester. And when I was puzzling about this conundrum about abundance, I read this study. And the researchers at the University of Rochester, they were looking at goals that people have. They were looking at graduating seniors, people a lot of your age. And here's how they were studying goals that people have. They said to these 150 graduating seniors, imagine yourself 5 years from now when you're 27. Okay? Imagine that you're successful and happy, whatever that means to you. Tell me about your life. Okay? Just tell me about your life. That's an ingenious research design, because basically it's asking people to define their own success and happiness, and then to define what goes into that, and that way they can back out what people's real life goals are. Okay? Now, what did they find? They found that people have lots of goals, but primarily the first line goals, there are 2 types, and it's 50-50. what people have. They call them endogenous goals and exogenous goals. Why the fancy names? Because the researchers have to get tenure. And that's how you do it. So, okay, so endogenous goals and exogenous goals. Endogenous goals are defined as goals about people and love and relationships. People who had endogenous goals says, when I'm 27 years old, I can imagine it's going to be great. I'm going to have a lot of friends, and I'm going to be close to my family. And some of them said, I want to be close to God. And some of them, this is crazy. You're not going to believe this. They said, I want to be married, right? Crazy stuff, right? I mean, it's like, I want to be married. Okay, that was half. The other half had exogenous primary goals, and that was, I want to be rich and famous, right? I want to be rich and famous. And so they would say, I want to be making more money than people my age. I want to be successful in my job. I want a lot of notoriety. I want a lot of exposure for the things that I do well. I want to work hard and get ahead, right? So 50-50, endogenous goals and exogenous goals. They followed up 5 years later, and they looked at what the kids were doing, and they came to two conclusions. Good news and bad news, okay? First, the good news. Everybody hit their goals. Everybody. The kids who said, I want to be close to my family, they were close to their family. I want to have good friendships, good friendships. I want to be close to God, they had a good spiritual life. Crazy. Those who said, I want to be married, were almost all either engaged or married. Careful what you wish for, by the way. It's, you're going to get it, is what the studies say. Also, the kids with exogenous goals about fame and money and worldly things, they had them. They were making more money than their friends. They were working longer hours. They were experiencing professional success. Now, this actually influenced my thinking because I work with a lot of young people. Of my 225 scholars and staff, a hugely disproportionate number are under 30. And they talk to me about their life goals a lot. And some of them will say, you know, what I really want is to get married, but who's got the time? I just can't find somebody. I'm thinking in my head, no, you don't. Now, I don't say that because I'm a good boss. But you know, basically what this suggests is you have to set your own goals and then live according to your goals because that's what you're going to get. That's the good news. What you wish for is what you're going to get, according to the study. Here's the bad news. Wrong goals, worse life. Wrong goals, worse life. They were asking about anger and physical maladies and life satisfaction and anxiety. Okay, and what do they find? If you have endogenous goals, I'm going to say it a bunch more times. I want you to remember it when I come back to the story of the Swami. If you have endogenous goals, low levels of anxiety, low levels of anger, high levels of life satisfaction, high levels of self-judged happiness. If you have exogenous goals, money and power, stomach aches, headaches, anger, sleeplessness, low levels of satisfaction. Not so good, right? Wrong goals, worse life. You can imagine how confused I am by this study because I'm this maximum proponent of capitalism. Yet I'm reading a study that appears to say, follow capitalism, get a worse life. Yet I still know that the third world is pulled up by these concepts. How does it all fit together? That's why I went to India. A little background on that, okay? So I get to Swami Gyanmuni. Fast forward to this Swami I just introduced you to, Swami Gyanmuni. And he tells me a story about his family when he was born in Houston. His parents had for him exogenous goals, money and power and fame. His parents said, make us proud, study hard, get ahead, make a lot of money. And so he did. He graduated from high school, valedictorian, age 16. He went to University of Texas. Here, graduated in 3 years, top of his class. Went on to get his MBA here, finished up early, and went to work for McKinsey. Now, McKinsey pays you lots of money, and his parents were so proud of him. He said he saw no prouder day than when he brought home his first paycheck, and it was bigger than his dad's. Okay, so he did this for a long time. He was 20 years old, by the way, when he entered the workforce. He was a young guy. He'd done everything fast, making a lot of money. Now, he said there were some certain sacrifices. He never really saw his family. He didn't have a girlfriend. He was working 100 hours a week. But he was making money hand over fist. It was great, he said. Went on like this for a bunch of years. He was on the management track. He thought he'd make partner by 32. Got to age 26. He woke up on his 26th birthday, he told me. Now, I'm riveted by this, but I have to tell you that it's still pretty surreal that I'm in India talking to a Swami who's from Texas and has an MBA. And I know that something's about to happen in the story because he's not rich anymore. He owns 4 things: 2 robes, prayer beads, and a begging bowl. So I know something big is about to happen in his life in the story, right? And sure enough, he wakes up on his 26th birthday and he says, is this it? I mean, making money? Is this it for the rest of my life? I'm just going to be on the hamster wheel? Sound familiar? When you're being pushed toward exogenous goals, toward the thing that leaves your soul cold, but you know that it's something that you can do? That's what he felt after doing it for 6 solid years. So he decided to go on kind of a vision quest, to go on a 6-month journey of prayer. See, he came from a very pious Hindu family, and he was religious himself. And he decided that he was going to pray about it every day for 6 months and then make a decision. And he got to the end of 6 months, and his decision was, sell everything, give everything to the poor, go to India, the land of his parents' birth, join a Hindu seminary, and become a monk. Took 6 years. He came out at age 32, a Hindu monk. And that's how I met him about 15 years after his ordination, as a monk, as a swami, as a sardu. Okay, now, I'm really confused at this point, because I've come to ask him about capitalism, and I know what he's going to say. See, by the way, he was calling me dude the whole time. He said, I was going to say, so, is capitalism good? I know what he's going to say. He's going to say, dude, man, it's a sham. It's a man-made prison. Throw off your shackles, dude. I know what he's going to say. But I asked it anyway. Swami, is capitalism good? And he said, no, it's great. It's the only system in history that's pulled people up out of poverty by the hundreds of millions in my country. But now I'm on the other side of the argument. And I said, but look at you, Swami. You own nothing except for a couple of robes. And you're telling me that capitalism is good? Isn't money bad for the soul? And he said, dude, the problem isn't money. I said, what is it? He said, it's attachment to money. Now I thought about it, and at first I said, well, that sounds really super Eastern, doesn't it? Sounds really kind of New Age. But then the light bulb went off. See, I was raised in a Christian home, as some of you were, and I remembered this Christian scripture that is most often misquoted. The most often misquoted scripture in the Bible is the first letter of St. Paul to Timothy, chapter 6, verse 10. Here's how it's misquoted. Money is the root of all evil. That's not the scripture. You know what it is? The love of money is the root of all evil. Turns out every religious tradition teaches this. If you prefer the Old Testament, Ecclesiastes 5:10, he who loves money never has enough of it. Isn't that the truth? Every religious tradition says the same thing. The problem isn't money. The problem is the love of money. The problem is the attachment to money. And therein lay my solution. Swami said to me, dude, do you want the secret to happiness? And I said, yeah, I want the secret to happiness. And he said, abundance without attachment. That's the title of my lecture tonight, abundance without attachment. Think about it. Isn't that the truth? Isn't that what your mother taught you as a kid? Abundance without attachment. The problem is we forget it. Why do we forget something so obvious? That money is okay, just don't love it. Why do we forget that? Why do we forget that the love of money is the root of all evil? And here's the answer. I got an answer for you. See, I'm a big conservative, so I have conspiracy theories. And the reason that we forget this truth is because there's a conspiracy at work. It's a conspiracy to keep you ignorant. Listen to the messages around you. Listen to the messages from Madison Avenue, from Hollywood, on television. They give you the secret to a happy life, the formula to a happy life. You know what they tell you the formula for a happy life is? Simple. Love things, use people. That's what they tell you. You know I'm right. Use people, love things. You know what the true formula for a happy life is? It's very simple. Turn it around. Look at the inverse. Render it virtuous. Use things, love people. That's it. Use what you want. Only love people. Only use things. That's the secret to a happy life. That is the secret of abundance without attachment. So here's the question. How? How do we do it? Easy to say, right? Sort of like you write it in Sanskrit in the holy book, right? harder to do, isn't it, when you're going about your day, when you're going to your classes, when you're trying to put one foot in front of the other every day? I won't be doing my job tonight unless I give you a couple of suggestions on how you can make this work for you. See, if I really do my job, when you leave here tonight, you're going to be able to do something different. And if you do what I suggest, my money-back guarantee, because this is a free lecture, by the way, my money-back guarantee is that you're going to be a happier person. You're going to start living abundance without attachment. So I'm going to give you 2 suggestions, okay? Suggestion number 1 for living the principle of abundance without attachment. Get into your head the physical, material thing to which you're most attached, okay? Give it away. Give it away. Charity is an act of rebellion against your attachment. Are you a rebel, or are you just a go along, get along, conventional type that says, I am not the master over my things, they are a master over me? If you choose to be a rebel against your attachment, then practice charity, which is the ultimate rebellious act. It is the act of detachment. Okay, now, I studied charity for a long time. Dr. Streeter mentioned that I did work on that when I was at Syracuse University. The first book I ever wrote, which was my 6th book, by the way, but the first book I ever wrote that human beings actually read, the first 5 books, by the way, were fascinating, but nobody ever read them, so you'll have to take my word for it. Not even my editor read them. It was problematic. But the 6th book is called Who Really Cares? And this was a book about who's giving to charity and who's not. Some people talk a big game, other people actually give. So I asked, who gives more? Poor people, rich people, old people, young people, Democrats or Republicans, right? What do you think got all the attention from that book? 1 week after I wrote the book, I found myself unexpectedly on the Rush Limbaugh radio show, right? Much to the great consternation of all of my friends in the faculty lounge at Syracuse University, as you can imagine. It was kind of a weird watershed moment, and my life kind of started to change. It was an interesting change, not an entirely welcome change, as a matter of fact. It made life harder for me, and it put me into the company of people I wasn't accustomed to. And that's what I was talking about. But, well, that wasn't what was in my head. See, what was really dominating my thoughts when I was doing that research was this one research finding that I couldn't make heads nor tails of. It's this one research finding that I kept seeing in the data over and over and over again, which was that the more money you give away, it appears, the richer you get. Now, that's not what you learn when you go get a PhD in economics. You don't learn that the best way for you to get rich is just to give all your money away indiscriminately to poor people. You learn that you should have a prudent investment strategy, that you should create value in the marketplace. You don't learn that give away your money, you're going to get richer. Yet that's what my data appeared to be saying to me. It was weird. I kept finding with big samples of tens of thousands of Americans across dozens of communities and the entire country over a long time series, I kept finding that the more people give, after they give, the more productive and lucrative and financially remunerative their life becomes. The more you give, the more you get. Okay, now, this is a problem. My theory said that's impossible. My data said that's what was happening. So I had this conflict between my theory and my data, right? And I did what a lot of college professors do when theory and conflict or theory and data are in conflict. I threw away my data. And I just kind of held on to my theory, right? But I couldn't get it out of my head. It was weird. I couldn't get it out of my head. I was kind of obsessed with it. And I was having lunch with this colleague of mine, a psychologist who did work in charitable giving, and I told him about this problem. I said, I have a data problem. I keep doing something wrong. Tell me what I'm doing wrong. I keep finding, and I know it's wrong, I keep finding that the more you give, the richer you get. And he said, well, duh, we've known that for 30 years in psychology. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, look, we don't look at it in terms of getting more money. We talk about something much more important, which is the more money you give away, the happier you get, and happier people always do better than unhappy people because a whole bunch of brain chemistry reasons. There's lower levels of stress and higher levels of self-efficacy, and people see you more as a leader, and there's a lot of studies on this. And I said, oh yeah, that kind of makes sense. So the light bulb goes off again, and I started seeing studies everywhere that said this. Give more, get more. Give more, get happier, some studies show. Give more, get healthier, a lot of studies show. My favorite studies, you know what they say? the more you give, the better looking you get. So it's great. Actually, there are these two guys at the University of Liverpool, and they do these studies where they bring men into the laboratory, but they have to be with their wives or girlfriends. Okay? And some guys have been married for a year, and some guys have been married for 50 years, and they bring them in, and they're in the building with his, the guy with a white lab coat, and he does one thing. He gives a pocket full of change to the husband, and he says, walk with your wife or girlfriend down to that next building down there, and my colleague is gonna interview you for 10 minutes, and then you're done. You get to go home and keep the change, by the way. Easy. Okay. So each couple sets out, jingle, 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 pocket full of change. And when they're halfway between the buildings, a homeless guy comes wandering out, and he panhandles the husband. Hey, buddy, you got some change? He does, right? They know he does. And the husband has to make a decision. How much am I going to give the homeless guy? Am I going to give it to him at all? And then he makes a decision. The transaction is complete. He goes on his way, and he gets interviewed. The couple gets interviewed at the next building, the next guy with the white lab coat. First, he starts by asking the husband, did you give the homeless guy any of the change? Then he asks the wife, how attractive do you find him right now? What are they looking for? The correlation between your generosity and how much she likes you. And what do they find? The more you give the homeless guy, the more your wife finds you attractive as a man. News you can use. What's the point? All of these studies reinforce the same point. Do you want to be a better person? Do you want to be a happier person? Do you want to be a less attached person? Think about the object of your attachment and give it away as an act of rebellion. That's number one. Number two, practice number two. Stop thinking about the price of things. Start remembering the value of endogenous experiences. Remember endogenous things? Endogenous things are relationships. They're about love. They're about people. Invest in those things with your scarce resources. Okay? Stop thinking about stuff. Start thinking about people and invest in your relationship with people, the people that you love. Okay, now, I've been married for a long time. I've been married for I just had my 24th wedding anniversary. And 23 and a half years ago, my new wife at the time, and I were having a big knockdown, drag-out fight. And the fight was about, ironically, how to celebrate our first wedding anniversary. Right? And here was the nature of the disagreement. We were poor. And my wife was working a minimum wage job, and I was going to school desperately trying to get my bachelor's degree, which I hadn't done on a timely fashion. I just finished up what my parents called my gap decade. And so we looked at the checking account, there's like tumbleweeds going through it. There was no money in there, but we wanted to do something for our wedding anniversary. So we figured that we could borrow and scrape together and beg for just enough money to do one of two things. We could go away to the beach for the weekend, or we could get a couch. And we didn't have a couch. And the rooms were really empty. So this was the disagreement. See, my wife is from Barcelona, and she's really all about the beach. And I'm a thrifty and practical American, so I'm really all about the couch, because we needed a couch. And this is what was the source of our contention. We were going back and forth, beach, couch, beach, couch, beach, couch. And finally, we made we came to a big compromise, and went to the beach. And years later, we were looking back on 20 years later, we were looking back on this, and we realized something. We realized something that you could call the paradox of things. Here's what it sounds like. See, we could have gotten the couch, and it would have worn out, and it would have been at the dump or on Craigslist, gone and forgotten. I wouldn't even know what color it is. Ultimately, we did get a couch, by the way, and ultimately it did wear out, and now I don't remember it at all. But I can tell you every hour of every day of that vacation what we did. It was magic. Why? Because we love each other. We still do. And this was important for us to cultivate our relationship, the love that we have in our hearts for each other. The paradox of things is the things that you think are permanent aren't, but the things that you think are evanescent because they're experiences are permanent in the ether of your imagination. Do you want truly permanent things? then go for the endogenous things, the love that you have, and invest in those things. There's a credit card commercial. It's the most successful credit card commercial in the history of the credit card industry. It's a MasterCard commercial. You've all seen it. Been running for 25 years. They update it every year, so it looks kind of modern, but it's always the same. It doesn't have any dialogue. It just has a voiceover, and there are people doing something. Here's one of them. There's a guy getting into a car with a kid, and the voiceover says, beach ball, $3. Gas for the car, $36. 2 nights in a hotel, $275. The weekend alone at the beach with my son, it's just an ad. What is it? It speaks truth. That's why it's effective. It doesn't matter how much it annoys you. It speaks to something that you know is true. I could give you 12 studies that show this. I could give you 1,200 studies that show this. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm simply going to tell you how this finally came home to me once and for all in my life. I have 3 teenagers at home. Pray for me. And my middle son, his name is Carlos. And Carlos is a piece of work. I mean, everybody's got a Carlos in their family. I mean, some of you guys back here, you're like Carlos. So, and I know what's going on. It's just because every family's got one. I mean, I'll give you an example. Last year, we're having this really bad parent-teacher conference. It's a grades issue with Carlos, and it's not going on YouTube, is it? So sorry, Carlos. So anyway, and we're having this bad parent-teacher conference, this big grades issue, and we get in the car to come home, and it's this icy silence. My wife and I aren't talking, and finally, my wife breaks the ice. And she says, here's how we need to think about it. At least we know he's not cheating. So see, this is Carlos. And so Carlos is always got some angle on everything, ironically. And notwithstanding the story I just told you. And about 6 years ago, Carlos comes, about this time of year, and Carlos comes to me and he said, he was 9 at the time, and he says, Dad, I've been thinking about Christmas. Now, immediately I'm on the defensive, right? I'm trying to divert attention. I said, well, it's good to have Christmas in your heart all year round, Carlos. You know, he's having none of it because he knows I'm trying to change the subject, right? He says, Dad, no, actually, I know what you're thinking. I don't want anything. All I want for Christmas this year is to go away hunting and fishing alone with you. And I'm thinking, that costs 19 times more than a bike, right? Dad of the year, right? So, but I didn't say that. I said, Carlos, that's great. Let's do that. And we did. And we do it every single year. December 26th this year, we're coming here. We're coming to a place called Marble Falls, Texas, which is 50 miles away from Austin. And we're going to hunt white-tailed deer and hogs and Rio Grande turkeys, and we're going to fish for bass in the afternoon in these beautiful ponds and lakes in this place, and we're going to do it for 4 days. And why do I tell you all the details? Because they're in here forever. I could buy him a bike or a scooter or some junk that would be broken and gone and forgotten after a month, but I can tell you everything that we've shot and everything that we've caught every single year, and I'll be able to do that until I die. And Carlos says to me now, Dad, when you're older, thank you, when you're older, I'm going to take you every year for Christmas. And he means it. See, he teaches me the principle of non-attachment to physical things. He teaches me the understanding of rebellion against the attachment that turns our lives and our material lives into a tyranny. He helps me to understand that abundance doesn't have to be a burden as long as we understand how to use it. So where are we? I've asked you to consider 2 things tonight. Number 1, join me as a warrior for the free enterprise cause, not for us and not for materialism, but for people who need it the most. Not anybody in this room, but for people who can't be in this room and who need to be lifted up. And you can do it too. You can be part of the reason that the next 2 billion people are pulled out of poverty by joining me in the virtuous fight for the free enterprise system that lifts everybody up and serves every single person, no matter what they look like and where they are, what their religion is, how smart they are, what their education is. We just have to find them and lift them up. Join me in that fight. Number 2, join me in the fight against attachment such that you and I can live happier, more fulfilling lives. What are you going to do today to declare your independence from materialism such that the abundance for which you're an advocate really will work for the people who need it the most? You're going to have to answer that question. I've given you 2 suggestions. But if you do that, you know what we get? We get a whole new ideology that goes beyond Democrat and Republican. It goes beyond right and left. It's abundance without attachment. It's true human consciousness that rides on along with the economic system that can give people a better life. We can only do that together. And by the way, we can heal the country this way too. You know that there's a profound equilibrium of division and hatred and pessimism that's enveloping our politics. You know how you fight that? You know how you beat that? You beat that by serving others and by making sure that your own morality is in order. And that's what I'm suggesting you today to do. This is the formula for doing it. If you join me in this, I believe that this can be a new time in American politics, and the world's going to get better, and it's going to be because of you. And because of your work to do that, all I can say in closing is God bless you for your work, and thank you. All right. Where's Ryan Streeter? There you are. We have a mic right here. So how much time do we have? Plenty of time, right? We have until 10 o'clock tonight. Okay, good. Okay, extra credit if you stay. Okay, so
15, 20 minutes.
Okay, we got 15, 20 minutes. We have plenty of time for questions. Let's talk about anything that's on your mind, from politics to economics to higher consciousness to the Dalai Lama. Let's talk about it all. Here the AEI house rules, which we'll use tonight, the same as the ones from here at the University of Texas. When you put up your hand and I call on you, please wait for the mic to come so that people can hear you. Tell me your name and what you're doing in your life, if you're a student here, for example, and then put your protest statement in the form of a question, and we'll be all set. Okay. Okay, who's first? Who's first? Anybody? Well, yes, ma'am, right here. But I got the mic coming to you.
My name is Mary Kevorkian. I'm a grandmother. I'm retired, and I heard at a memorial service this week something that goes along with this. If you want to be in your grandparents' memory in the future, you best be part of their lives today.
If you want to be in your grandchildren's memory in the future, be a part of their lives today. Right. Beautiful, isn't it?
I thought that was
It's abundance without attachment. Thank you for sharing that. Let's take it all to heart. And not just your grandkids. If you want to be in your friends' memories, if you want to be in the memories of all the people around you, be in their lives today. You can't do that by buying them stuff. You can only do that by opening your heart and giving of yourself. Exactly right. Who's next? Who's got a thought? Yes, sir. We got one in the back right here, and we'll have a mic coming up to you. It's coming up the side.
My name is I'm a blogger locally and active in a variety of different things. My question is, do you want to touch on the difference between free enterprise as you're discussing it tonight and the type of cronyism that frequently masquerades as free enterprise that we frequently see discussed in the news? You know, good example that we see a lot of would be for, the bank bailouts compared to Uber.
Yep. Absolutely. Thank you. And let's make that distinction. Free enterprise does not mean wiring around the rules and using disproportionate influence to get a better system of favors from the government. Now, again, I live in D.C. Some of you are going to wind up in D.C. And the thing that's going to bug you the most is the power that people have of getting close to government and rewiring the rules, and then the nerve that they have to call it capitalism. One of the things that we were talking about, we had a little reception before this for members of the AEI Enterprise Club who are here, and get to know them and join them if you want to. Join our merry band of pranksters. I recommend it. But one of the things that we were talking about is, look, there are only two kinds of people. There are only two kinds of people out there. People who want to win the competition of whatever, of ideas, of business, of politics, of whatever, and people who want to shut down the competition. The problem that we have is that true free enterprise is all about virtuous competition. And there are people who are masquerading as free enterprise warriors who want to shut it down. And that's what we see a lot of in Washington, D.C. A big blind spot that a lot of people on the political right have today, quite frankly, is that they believe that anything that business does is axiomatically a good thing. That is not true. To the extent that you're trying to make it harder for your competition to exist through a system of unfair rules and regulations because of your power and proximity to government, you're not acting according to virtuous free enterprise. You're not acting according to free enterprise at all. You're basically a crony, and it's no better than what was going on with the apparatus of power in the former Soviet Union, where people who were closer to the socialist regime had more opportunities and more goods and more services and more money. And that's basically what people are doing in Washington, D.C. today. And if they act in accordance with true free enterprise, they'll act as true competitors. Thank you for helping me to make that distinction. Who's next? Yes, sir.
My name is Christopher. I'm a sophomore. I'm studying economics here. And one of the things my professor talks about, he's a tenured professor, he's teaching macroeconomics, and he talks a lot about discrimination and how the capitalist system is geared more towards one race of people or one gender of people even. And I don't really know how to think about that. It's really confusing to me. I just kind of want your take on that.
Sure.
It's almost like if you're one thing or the other, you're better off in the free enterprise system.
Sure. Okay. Good. Discrimination, capitalism. How does it all hang together? So our understanding of capitalism today in the free enterprise system fundamentally comes from one pivotal thinker in the late 18th century, Adam Smith. You all heard of Adam Smith. He wrote The Wealth of Nations in 1776, a pretty important year in American history, a really important year in the Scottish Enlightenment as well, because the Scottish professor of moral philosophy writes this treatise on how markets can lift everybody up in the world. And that's what people who are studying economics, they really understand, and that's what all of our understanding of this today kind of roots itself back in this fundamental seminal text. Okay. Now, here's the thing to keep in mind. That wasn't Adam Smith's first book or his best book. The book that was more important to Adam Smith and should be more important to us today was written 17 years earlier in 1759. It was called The Theory of Moral Sentiments. And it talked about how people can earn the right to be free and what a decent and good society is all about. And people can treat each other with basic common decency, with a basic sense of what today we would call brotherhood. Now, why is it important? Why do I bring that up? Because the truth is that morals come before markets. Markets are a machine. They're like a car. You can use your car for great good, or you can use your car for evil. If you don't have any morals, I don't recommend you get on the road, because you can do the wrong thing with this unbelievably productive and miraculous tool, which is your automobile. The same thing is true with markets. Markets are not inherently immoral. A lot of people will say that today, but they're wrong. They're not inherently moral either. They're amoral. Markets can't have morality because markets aren't people. Only people can have morality. It starts with you. What's written on your heart about people that you want to help? What is your proclivity toward the weak? What is your view on people of other races and of the opposite gender, of people who need to be lifted up? Because if you are properly oriented toward other people and there's love written on your heart, then markets are going to be a force for good. That's the key thing to remember. There is nothing inherent about markets at all, but we have to remember that as people, we have to keep our hearts straight and right. And that's the reason for that's the very reason that motivated my talk here tonight. And thank you for that fantastic question. Who's next? Back here, yes, sir.
My name is Caleb. I'm a student. In your book, you talk a lot about how conservative policies can be used to help poor people. One thing that a lot of people are talking about now on local levels is identification, and a lot of local governments respond by putting in rent controls, which I'm sure you know are problematic because they make it really hard to get a house if you're not already living there.
Right.
So my question is, liberals going to come at you with this criticism that when you're against rent controls, you're destroying communities, not allowing participation. Do you know of any conservative policy mechanisms that keep the housing market competitive while also preserving communities.
For sure. And this is, by the way, so how do you keep housing markets competitive while at the same time making sure that poor people are not entirely marginalized? It's the same thing about wages, by the way. Conservatives always argue against a minimum wage. So what's your answer? What are you going to do given the fact that you can't actually raise a family on $7.25 an hour? You can't do it. So you got to have some sort of an answer. You can't just say, no minimum wage and then walk away. That's hard-hearted. I think all of us, almost all of us, I hope all of us would agree on that. So what are we going to do about market distorting policies, and what's our answer if we don't want to distort these markets? As a conservative, as a free marketeer. And the answer is, just because you're in favor of free enterprise doesn't mean you're against the safety net. Now, here's what some of you are political conservatives, okay? If you are, I would ask you to join me in declaring peace on the safety net, which is one of the truly greatest achievements of the capitalist system. Only capitalism has created the largesse, the money in our society so that we can, as a society, what a miracle, we can actually help people that we've never met and will never see. First time in human history, my friends. And that's because of capitalism. But it should be only for the poor, and it should be always accompanied by productive work. These are two conservative principles that I urge to you as well. And that means basically that instead of the minimum wage, which does in fact destroy jobs at the bottom, it's not motivated by anything bad. It's motivated by something good, which is we want more people to work more and get paid more. That's a great thing, right? That gives people meaning and dignity. Fantastic. The problem is it's a messy policy that while lifting some people up destroys the jobs for others. So let's have a policy that's consistent with the idea of ordinary, sanctified, dignified work that doesn't destroy jobs at the bottom, even if it costs money. That's why I pay taxes. That's why I want to pay taxes. And what do? Well, there are lots of policies that do that have wage subsidies, that have a policy called the Earned Income Tax Credit expansion. These are things that Republicans and Democrats should come together on so you don't have to raise the minimum wage, but people do make more. The same thing is true in terms of how we help people to live in places that are becoming expensive. We have to have our morals in order to say that we want neighbors who are different than us. That's a pretty tough one, by the way. You go to Aspen, Colorado, where everybody's super progressive, right? But they don't really want poor people there, right? That'd be kind of controversial. We don't want that so very much, right? And because poor people like park their car on the lawn or something. So we don't want any of that stuff, right? That's a problem. Do we believe that different people should live together? I do. I do. And if that's the case, then we need government policies that are kind of like the Earned Income Tax Credit so that people can live together even if they have different economic means. Now, that takes a lot more than just a little bit of legislation. It takes a social commitment to people deciding that they want a different kind of society that discriminates less, which gets back to your point here. We want to discriminate less. But that is not inconsistent with conservative principles. On the contrary, earning your living, living in a society where people are different, these are deeply conservative principles. And they're compatible with progressive policy as well. And that's what we need to do. So that's how we sort these types of things out. Don't distort markets because you're going to hurt the people you're trying to help. That's the only reason it matters. But do find a different way that we can use our public resources as a society to express the values that we hold dear of solidarity and brotherhood. Right up here. Got a mic coming to you.
Hey, my name is John. I'm a CPG fellow, excuse me. I was wondering if you could touch on some strategies for using capitalism in developing countries, and how to use those strategies morally when the aggressive spread of capitalism or democracy can sometimes lead to a feeling of colonialism or imperialism.
Okay, so what are the strategies? And the answer is that the idea that the spread of capitalism leads to a sense of colonialism or imperialism only exists in my experience, and I travel a lot in the developing world, only exists among people who are privileged, who are elites in those places. Again, I go to India all the time. Who talks about neocolonialism because of capitalism? The people who've been rich for 1,000 years. Those are the people who do it. You know the people who want more capitalism? The people in the slum who want to stop starving. I'm shooting a movie these days. I'm shooting a movie called The Secret of Happiness. It's a documentary. It's going to come out in 2017. And when I was in India with the Dalai Lama, before that I was filming in a slum called Dharavi. It's one of the largest slums in Asia. It's inside Mumbai. And I was walking around with these guys that, just 2 generations ago, their families were literally starving to death. And today, it's a slum. I mean, it's poor. It's poor by our standards. It's hard to look at. It's hard to be part of. But these people are saying, do you realize how great this is? Because we're able to do things, earn a living, make things, sell things. This is what they want. They want the capitalism that we take for granted in this country. I was talking to this guy. He's kind of a sort of minor star in this film that we've got. This great guy. His name is Krishna Pujari. He's from Bangalore, and he was poor when he came to the slum. So poor, he had 1 pair of pants. He didn't know it was going to happen, but he started this little business, and he was taking me around the slum, and he was saying, you gotta see this through my eyes. Don't look at this through American eyes where you say, oh, they're so poor. He says, look at it through my eyes, where people are working and not begging. We go up to this rooftop, and it's 97 degrees, and the weather forecast, literally, you look on your iPhone, the weather forecast is 97 and smoke. That's a weather forecast there, right? I mean, it's crazy to us. And we're looking out over all of these rooftops of this shanty town, and across all these rooftops is chips of plastic from water bottles that have been ground up and that have been washed and are baking in the sun. And they're going to melt them down and recycle the plastic and turn it into something else. And Krishna says to me, he says, what do you see when you look out across this? And it was just bags of trash. And I said, garbage. And he said, wrong. That's opportunity. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, you threw something away in your house because it was garbage to you. It came here. We grind it up and melt it down. We make it into something else. It winds up back in your house. And every step in this chain is someone's dream. Who am I to say that that's neo-colonialism? That's nothing more than academic mumbo-jumbo. Somebody is not starving to death today because of entrepreneurship. And that entrepreneurial ideal came when people saw how you live. Pass it on. Fight for it. Don't listen to these countercultural ideas because they're hurting the people that we're supposed to help, that we're commanded to help, that we're morally beholden to help. You have it in your hands. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican. It doesn't matter if you're a hardcore progressive or conservative. You get to say, I got the solution, by taking that forward and remembering the face of Krishna Pujari as opposed to the college professor who actually says, neocolonialism, wrong. Lifting up the poor, that's right. Who's next? I say this as a college professor, by the way. We got another one here. Okay, we got one more. I can talk to you afterward because if somebody else will come to here right in the middle, which is perfect because it's symmetric. And this will be our last question. Mike is coming to you.
I'm a student in UT Austin, majoring in computer science. I have a question. How can government solve the immigration problem?
That's a big one. How can government solve the immigration problem? That takes on special significance in the wake of what happened in Paris on Friday. And it depends really on what kind of immigration problem you're talking about. There isn't one immigration problem. There are hundreds of immigration problems. My view is, and I work with presidential candidates and senators and congressmen. It's my job. It's a really weird job, but it's great because I get to talk to the people that are going to make these laws and they're going to be arguing these things. And they often ask sort of the same question, what do I do about immigration? It's so tough. Now I have strong views on this. If I'm against immigration, I sleep on the couch. I mean, it's a pretty simple one for me. I'm all about different people living together. I'm all about the ferment of a society where we have diversity. I love it. I think it's important. I think it's great. That's one of the reasons I love universities, because there's so many different kinds of people all living together, right? I wish there were more ideological diversity, by the way. I think that would be a good thing, too. I devoted my last New York Times column to that subject, if you're interested in reading that. But what do we do, therefore, about when people ask about the immigration issue? What can we do first? What are the easiest things to do? Here's what I suggest. You know, people will always say we need some sort of grand bargain in America to solve the immigration issue. That's wrong. Grand bargains are for chumps. Grand bargains are for people who don't want to get something done because it's too hard to do. So if you really hate immigration reform, either because you're trying to hurt the Republicans and make them look like bigots and greedy people, or you hate the Democrats and you don't want their agenda to pass, the thing that you suggest is a grand bargain. Bad idea. What you want is incrementalism. You want to set the 30 things that we need to do over the next 5 years and order them with respect to how easy they are politically and how important they are, and start marching through the agenda. You know what number one is? It's more high-skilled visas to people, because both right and left should agree that we need more people with lots of skills coming to this country. It's a pathological viewpoint to say that we don't need more high-skilled people. I want more brain drain coming our direction, effectively, right? Because that's going to lift people up every place if we do it right, and we have a sense of our place in the world. But you know what? I want you to stay here. That's what I want. I want, when you finish your education, I want to keep your passport. I want you to stay. I don't mean that literally, by the way. It's on camera, too. Oh, no. All right, but that's what I want, because I want more, and I want to make it easier to do that, and that's the first thing we ought to pass. The second thing we ought to do is talk about a guest worker program in this country so that people with lower skills can't be exploited in the workforce. The biggest problem that we have with relatively low-skill, undocumented workers is they're systematically exploited, and it's not right. And a guest worker program would sort that out, and we could have more understanding of who's in our country and who's not, who's here legally, who's here illegally, and most importantly, there will be less exploitation of workers. And I could go down the line and tell you the first 10 things that we would need to do, and if we did all those 10 things, by the time we got to the end of it, it wouldn't be controversial anymore. And people would say, oh, we actually have a different immigration system, and we could sort it out. So incrementalism is the way. Now, I realize that it's not very dramatic for me to end on the note of dreaming incremental dreams. But I will tell you once again that I am deeply grateful to all of you for giving me an hour and 15 minutes or whatever it is of your time. Thank you for the work that you're doing to bring our country together and to work for the people who need us the most. These are the poor, these are the marginalized, these are the people at the periphery of society. God bless you for doing that. Thank you.